in our own backyard gardens, I bet 40% of the food will be grown in America after 2023. It'll be that traumatic of an event coming up for those few months. Now, here's the secret, though. If you're prepared and you have some stored foods, you can have some seeds, microgreens, you can grow some things in a garden, save that, can things, dry things, dehydrate, whatever. If you're even a smidgen prepared and you can rock through these, say, 8 months until the next planting season, you'll be just fine. We all will. But it's that point of September onward until the next planting season that you need to get ready for.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. There's quite a bit of difference depending on where you live with the problems you're going to come across. There's no one size fits all farming, which is really cool when people get together like on these. And we talk a lot about, surviving in the future with community. Part of that is just basic, same thing that's been keeping man evolving all this time is the acquiring of knowledge and the trading of knowledge.
Now, could I start off with a semi-deep thought here? Does anybody mind? Would be the question of the evening. In addition to getting 6 guinea fowl today, so I can use them to patrol the property to eat all the damaging insects off my garden plants, they're going to enrich the soil, and then natural clover and different wildflowers will grow next year as well. That's an off-topic thing, though. But anybody see the market dropping? And you could say, oh, that's financial news. But what if I was to say the predicted fertilizer shortages and the food blockades, the resource nationalism, and the cost of food rising exponentially, borderline hyperinflation is starting to hit, like I said, May and June. The end of May, we're not in the end of May yet, but in about 3 more weeks into the first week of June, there's a lot of people with a lot of money that get the message that things are going to continue to increase and go into deficit and shortages as we move through to this harvest season, and people are going to get more ready. So would it not make sense that we're seeing a sell-off in the markets of people going, whoa, I need liquid cash to go buy a greenhouse. I need liquid cash to go put up a fence around 3 acres. I need liquid cash to put in my orchard. I need liquid cash to get out of the city and get some country land. It seems that as I was talking about the financial news, the business news, economic news, agricultural news, is starting to blend in to give the messaging with the IMF, the World Bank, and the Bank for International Settlements, and now so many other institutions saying food shortages October, harvest season this year. So would it make not sense that the markets are crashing as people are exiting to get funds to buy more stuff? And then I was watching an interview today. Would artificial intelligence start manufacturing as humans are no longer needed, but the manufacturing process can get the world back in balance again after the reset of the economy? And that's how I like to start the show. Ransom, thanks for joining, man. I'm super stoked you're here tonight. So many things to talk about. Thanks for the messages through the week. And Rumble, thanks for joining tonight, live streaming on Rumble and right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
It was actually talking about how corporations are taking over all the farmland specifically, and they have an agenda to build these giant manufacturing vertical grow farms. And we're talking Monsanto, Bayer, Bill Gates, of course, and they are well into this scheme that they have going on just in time for what's going on around the world as far as food is going on. So they have a plan. They want to take over the entire food market. They're going to use this reset, whatever you want to call it, that they're doing right now. And they're putting forward their plans exponentially faster now that they realize there's so many people catching on. So they're moving forward faster. And these places are going to be producing food, mostly greens and stuff like that you would think. And the type of farming is technically organic. On top of that, they're using all kinds of new nanotechnology to track, trace every last little leaf of lettuce that's going out there. And the public is in for a rude awakening into this new transition. So the world is not growing like they always have. Everywhere you look around the world, planting's late, planting didn't happen, planting was flooded, planting was frozen, wildfires, drought. And those are just like some of the normal natural reasons. And then you pile on top of it the events of the last 2 years, and you see that we are in this exponential crash, if you will, for at least for the Americans listening right now that think they're in a bubble and they're not going to be affected. I have another thing to tell you. You are going to be affected. And down to a personal level, I'm starting over this week and planting because the first 2 rounds of planting that I did have already been devastated by insects. I'm trying to grow organic food, of course, so I'm not going the pesticide route. I've been using all kinds of different solutions. There's just millions of the insects versus my little amount of growing. So I'm skipping to all pots this year because of the bugs. The pill bugs specifically, they're just eating everything. So all of the beautiful amaranth, lettuce, I mean, you name it that I had growing, sprouting, it was looking like I was going to have a great year as far as volunteer growth and seeds I put everywhere. But no, all of the fresh, anything green here in the desert has been chewed up. They ate every last bit of it. But I have realized once you get the plant going to a certain state, they'll finally just leave it alone.
Ransom, could I ask you, like,
Yeah.
in these pots there, are they really closely spaced together?
The ones I'm doing now are, and they're away from the actual ground, so there's just no way for the pill bug. They're doing good. I have lots of little plants going now, but like I said, the ones that I had grown, they just devoured everything. Every little succulent new sprout that came out, from amaranth to watermelon to melon, squash, everything. They just ate it. The only thing they left alone was carrots. I guess they don't like the taste of the carrot sprouts or whatever it is. I'm not really sure why, but they left those alone, so those are coming along fine. But all of my main food sources that I was planning on growing, peppers, all of that, they chewed all of that up. And I've been slowly, transplanting them from the small little pots once the plant gets a little bit bigger, and those are all doing good. So skipping to when the plant's a little bit bigger because the bugs, naturally don't want to eat a live plant, but there's something they just can't resist those little succulent sprouts there. So I'm going to have to do a whole different style of farming, and then making a bunch of new beds. And I've been going around, what is it, the little diamond dust powder, and
Diatomaceous clay.
Yeah, I left that to you to pronounce because I never do it right.
Exactly. That's like molybdenum. Nobody knows how to pronounce that one either.
Yeah, I spread that everywhere for the beetles and stuff. But as you know, pill bugs are, they're isopods, I think. So that doesn't even affect them in the same way. So that's really for just the lettuce fleas and beetles and stuff. But all of my transplants of bigger plant on the good side are doing well, and they're exploding. So I have like, really big Roma lettuce outside right now. And these little colonies of Egyptian walking onions are going ballistic in all of the places I did grow food, and the soil's been kind of eroded and it isn't so rich. Those onions love that stuff. And that's just sitting there waiting, and it's constantly producing new ends to it because it just falls over and drops more. It plants itself. Evidently, those pill bugs don't really like lamb's quarter because all of those things are just, those are ready to eat. So weirdly, on the wild side of things, is doing good, and then the farming type of stuff that I intentionally put got chewed up and eaten.
One comment and one question then, because when we planted our tomatoes last year, we didn't realize they would grow as vigorously as they did with the types that we got, like these beefsteak tomatoes and big, heavy, thick, versus Roma or some type of like sweet cherry tomato. So our row spacing was too close together, and in the beginning they did great, but then they were just too close together and there was not enough air movement in there, and then the insects hit us. Yeah. So I'm wondering, question, like, when did you notice these pill bugs? Because for us with the tomatoes, we didn't start to notice it until the tomatoes actually started cracking, and then the leaves were a little bit yellowing, and then you looked under the leaves and you're like, oh no.
No, they were right on it this year. I think they've been busy munching last year's, growth that's been cut down and all that stuff. So they had an adequate food supply over the winter, and they just exploded this spring right at the same time as everything was sprouting as soon as it turned warm. The tomatoes, I got those figured out, though. They're doing pretty good. The last couple of years I had just tomato forests on accident. And the tomatoes are great because you can kind of plant them far up the stalk, and they'll grow new roots. So you can kind of plant them deep as a big plant so that you don't have to tie them over as much. And growing them with melons seems to work out perfectly, at least honeydew and cantaloupe, things like that, because the vines kind of grow in together with the tomato plant and give it structure, but they don't choke out the tomato plant. So, I mean, the last couple of years here on my small lot, we've had hundreds of pounds of tomatoes, like Bitter Boy, beefsteak. Little advice to some people out there: Home Depot and other places like that this time of year, right about now, start throwing out hundreds of little sapling plants as soon as the spring buying cycle's over, and they'll just dump them in the trash. And a lot of times the employees are more than happy to just let you take those. And I've done that at least one year where I didn't even anticipate how much they would explode. So I planted those about every 2 foot in the desert soil out here. I thought whatever, they were free plants, and it turned into a tomato forest. They really like that sandy spacing, and that's a big score for somebody if they can get that. So look out for all the chain stores getting rid of their old products right as soon as the planting season's over here at the end of May. They'll start getting rid of everything.
And I'll say Home Depot also, if you're going to get wood there, that, once they put a pallet, well, not a pallet, but it's one of those wrapped bales of wood on a pallet that they stack in, you can sort through. Like once it's been sorted through enough where everybody's picked the good pieces out, if they will sell that stuff for like 10 cents on the dollar, the pieces that keep being re-rotated for like 3 or 4 days in a row and never get sold, they will, at the end of either the week or the month, depending on where you are at, they will sell that wood, but you have to contact the service desk first or the pro center to know exactly when that wood's going to be sold. How would I know that? Well, I'm building a fence and we're using these 4x4 posts. And that's exactly what we need is the 4x4 6-foot post, 2 foot underground, bunch of rock, concrete, spend the money for the concrete. You could ram earth, but I mean, man, that is so much difficulty. And I'm starting to realize the benefit of spending the money for concrete versus the calories and the time spent to ram it with earth and then find additional earth to get in there to make it super. And then when it rains, that could all come up in a second because it just gets soft again. And then your fence could sag or whatnot. There's so many things I've learned in this last 2 weeks or last week about trying to protect what you have and not in an offensive way, but sort of a defensive way in many forms. We're keeping the raccoons out of your chicken coop, or what we're trying to do is make a living fence of exactly what we're talking about, Ransom: tomatoes, peas, beans, Malabar spinach, anything that's growing up. And even though you talk about squash or some kind of pumpkins that have enough girth in that mesh web, that welded fence, to get up in there and continue to grow even if it's heavy. And having like 1,000 feet of grow fence, 1,000 foot of vertical fence. You know how long it takes to put gardens out and then string that so your tomatoes can come up and your beans can come up? You're stringing wire all over the place. So what if you were to build the fence once, a perimeter fence to keep things in or keep things out? We're doing it for both. But then using that lattice to support different vegetables growing on it in perpetuity. Like you can get the annuals or you can get the perennials. It doesn't matter as long as they produce food and they're in the right place. That's 1,000 foot of fence. I mean, imagine how much food you could produce in 1,000 feet of garden. And that's where it needs to move to, is that thought. But then again, being economical about it. Could they not have a counter out there that, all right, give a nickel for a plant, or give 1 cent for it or whatever? Don't throw it away. Why would they do such things? But look for the wood on sale after they go through, because we had to buy a huge amount of 4x4s to put H-posts out to get corners on the fences and like I say, concrete. The price has gone up from like $1.95 a bag to $3.45 a bag here. But again, I'm thinking longevity. Things are available now, but they might not be in 5 years. I want those posts in the ground, and I'm willing to spend the extra $3 or $2, whatever it works out to, for all those posts to average it in around multiple acres. I don't want people walking into my fruit trees that I'm growing in the small orchard in front. Ransom, we talk forever about this. A lot of people would walk past your fence and not even know that there's edible foods growing on it. How do you think into the future from now about trying to get something a little bit cheaper because of hyperinflation? Now, could you use those 4x4s in a different way, but we need a perfect post because we're going to wrap wire around that. Can't have some that's knotted off, that's not exactly, it's just barely a square, but the size of the tree, you could just still see the roundness in it where the sawmill didn't get it exactly perfect. But so many things to learn. I'm in a learning process every day. This whole last 10 days has been nothing but fence for me. So it was like a crash course in fencing. I guess you could buy that at a university, but I'd rather use my own money as the tuition to buy the materials to then do it on the job training by myself with the person and then just do it all and then learn all that as a skill set. But that's just me, because skills are going to be the number one thing. If I could walk into your farm right now and go, I can help you put the fence up, you're going to be like, oh man, thank you so much. Because it's such a tedious task to do such a thing. And if you even have that skill and you even know anything about fencing and you volunteer, welcome in. I'll feed you to help me fence right now. And that's a no BS assessment. Anybody out there, you come up here and work for the next 7 to 10 days with us and put the fence in, I'll feed you and give you a place to stay. That's how valuable that labor is.
I sometimes trip on the comparison of what we're doing because you have, I'm sure, bigger piece of property, and it's also in a place that gets a lot of rain and stuff. So you're having to, deal with all of these environmental problems when you do construction. I'm kind of lucky on that behalf. If you lived anywhere in a valley, pretty much in New Mexico, you'll know the sandy clay is like concrete. So you can just dig a good size hole with a post hole digger that's about the size of the post pretty easily because of the way the clay and the sand break off, so you could dig it. And then, you load it full of rocks in the gap, fill it full of wet dirt. It's just like concrete for years. And the rain rarely ever penetrates the ground far enough to ever move it, or you don't have to worry about the ground saturation like that. You could put up old, used, half-rotted posts and do exactly what you're talking about if you have the water.
No way. See, here it's the opposite. It's so rainy all the time. You really need to take that into consideration. Like, seriously, your stuff's going to rot away if you don't make it the best when you start.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. There's quite a bit of difference depending on where you live with the problems you're going to come across. There's no one-size-fits-all farming. Which is really cool when people get together like on these, and we talk a lot about, surviving in the future with community. Part of that is just basic, same thing that's been keeping man evolving all this time is the acquiring of knowledge and the trading of knowledge. I discovered pouring through online articles about how do you get rid of the pill bugs, and they seem to really like citrus, so you can, get rid of old rotten limes or lemons or whatever and put them out there if you're going to go through the trouble of going out there and capturing them every night and throwing them away. I realized there was just too many of them per amount of space I have, so I just had to go with other solutions like making new beds where the bugs can't even get in them, so you don't have that problem, which is really cool too in the desert, because if you use a bucket system and they're well ventilated and you water them on time and they have a little shade, you can constantly move them around as needed for when the sun moves throughout the sky differently throughout the summer, like the difference between May and August, and you can get the optimal sunshine and little information like that from different people in different places. Because I'm sure that somebody that lives, like, say, in Florida with real soupy, swampy is on a whole different trip than even you in Tennessee or me in the desert, acquiring all that knowledge. And like you said, I learned a lot about construction and especially farm work when I was a kid looking for money. And I know that's not available to a lot of young people as much as it was when I was a kid. It's kind of weird to be old enough to even say that. But when I was a kid, you could find some farmer desperate to pay you $5 to $10 an hour to post hole dig all day and then wire that stuff up. And I didn't know anything about the pesticides or the herbicides, and fields of spreading those things with the little pumps on your back that leak all over the place. There's a whole generation of people that have to deal with that. But the difference, though, they did get out there and learn all these different farming techniques just doing basic construction. The idea of having a whole generation right at the time when we're going into a needing time of education and skilled people, We have a big lack of that and a lack of knowledge all around. And I always joke about people under 30 or really under my age now. It's hard to get one that can actually even read a measuring tape, which is, basic first, second grade mathematics that you should have learned with a ruler and some fractions. I don't remember exactly when it was, but every kid should have known that.
But that's the way people are going to need to think, taking on autonomy back to the food again. Because as we see, this great reset thing is all about upsetting and curtailing and turning off the valves and levers and knobs of food production, delivery of foods, and delivery of farm inputs to grow the foods, and also disrupt the economy at the same time so things can't trade equally any longer, upset the balance of futures markets so farmers can't even hedge their losses. But it does look like if anybody's farming this year, they're going to be multimillionaires based on the pricing where everything's tripling. But the farm inputs aren't there, so whoever got it, got it. And whoever had the fertilizer is going to be the king of the land, because I was reading an article, speaking of this great reset, Brazil is going to be applying 25% less on its crops this year. And that includes soy, corn, and wheat, and coffee, all four. So if you think about those four that are grown there for the cash crops and exports that supply a lot of the world, they're swing producers. So on a simple calculation, a 1% reduction in fertilizer in heavily farmed lands that rely on fertilizers to continue production, which would be Brazil and the breadbasket of the States. It's been farmed for 100 years, and the only thing in the soil is actually the fertilizer that they add to it. Well, Brazil is very much the same way. We all know the stories of the rainforest. Once you deforest it, it's good for 70 years, and they have to add, just like we do in Kansas and Oklahoma and Nebraska, it's just 1,000% fertilizers in there just to give something into the soil so the plants will grow. No fertilizer, there's nothing left living in those soils. So Brazil's going to cut 25% of the fertilizer application across the entire country for the next year. This is a forecast right here. Brazil will lose 25% of its agriculture in the year 2022. Whatever happens here is going to happen in the Southern Hemisphere. As soon as we rock into our October, it's going to be a 2.0 down there. And they're already telling you they're going to cut super incredible lean. Like food nationalism and resource nationalism is going to be a thing. The food's going to get lean on the planet. I mean tight. Incredibly expensive. And not having the fertilizer inputs and the farm machinery parts that we need, and diesel going to all-time record pricing, only pushes farmers higher on every cost, and not enough herbicides, which is a whole different thing to think about than just fertilizer input. And then the supply chain breakdowns, then the trade wars and the currency devaluations, the currency wars. Okay, all these things are happening at the same time. It's planned. With a capital P. Like, how can people not see that what is happening in front of us with hyperinflation, guaranteed food shortages, Bank of International Settlements, International Monetary Fund, and World Bank all saying the same thing about October, food shortages, famines, all this stuff. They're all saying the same exact thing at the highest echelons of banking in the world. And Schwab flapping his lips over there, great reset. And everything going up weekly and minutely and bi-weekly, and the price increases, and then people are sitting here going, oh, it's just because they didn't do something with the dollar. Oh, they printed too much money. Now, wait a second, that's the distraction. Look around you. Can you imagine the perfect timing of all this to happen at this point when these same idiots are saying we're going into a reset and all these things resetting at the same time, and they're still watching Netflix? I'm working my fingers to the bone, getting sunburnt UV 11 for like the entire day, trying to cover myself so my skin doesn't burn, so I can get my posts in place so I can grow food on a lattice. That's the kind of motivation you need to get through this, not sit and watch Netflix blaming gas price rises. That's the distraction. There's a huge amount of people that understand Ukraine and Russia are responsible for 30% of the world's exportable food. That is going to zero. So where is the food going to come from for the export buying? Those nations that bought and rely on those two countries for imports for their food just aren't going to get it. Then what? Then Brazil's down 25%? You think America should sit here and continue to sell our grains across the planet? You think we should continue to waste our grain production producing ethanol? So this is where we kind of sit at this moment here, as the awareness of all of you, what I'm talking about is about 20% of the world's population. So how are they going to move and take their funds out, and what are they going to do with it? What would be the first thing you would grow? If you were diving into growing for the first time and you were looking for a high value, micronutrient rich superfood kind of food, and it was the first time you were going to grow something, or you're looking for a no-brainer that is always going to produce, what plant would it be? Maybe the more correct question. Gynura? Moringa? I'm not sure, but targeting a first like no-brainer food, superfood. 2022, as we come to the end of it, 50% of the planet will understand what's happening around July and August when they do the crop tours. And then the futures markets are going to respond to that, and there's going to be huge upsets in addition to the decline or the downturn in the stock market. That's people selling that need the money to get stuff, that understand what I'm telling you tonight. They're selling right now to get the money to go buy things. That's what's happening. That's why there's a sell-off. Forget all the scare in the market. Forget the wars. No. It's because they're all getting the messaging that there's going to be a food shortage at the end of the year. And they're running out to buy chickens and geese and whatever, and all kind of farm implements and feed and fertilizer if you can get it. They're buying all kind of stuff. They're exiting to buy stuff. You should too. But then the crop tours will come, and then the other 50% of the people will get it. And by that time, there's going to be a lot of stuff short. But then October, the rest of the world wakes up. Then what? Once the world realizes that our food is going to be very limited in choice and so expensive that to balance fuel cost increases for driving your car, and also at the same time energy increases at the house, prices to heat the home, and then your food prices, everything's tripling across the board. A lot of people can't afford that, and that's the upset factor. And that's the reason during these grand solar minimum events that governments are overthrown, or there could be a restructuring of the way the government oversees the people, or it has to respond to the angriness of the people, should be a way to say it. And however angry they are at that moment, the new ways to corral them in are solidified at that point. And that becomes the paradigm for the next 100 years after this event. But when October comes in, it's going to be a little scary for most of us. But I'll give a little hopeful message by saying that the shortages are going to be so vast and so stark and so mind-altering, like it was with the Great Depression. For grandparents that I had saved everything. They threw nothing away after that event. That's going to make that look small. So people are going to get spurred to action. And as they do, I do believe in 2023, in our own backyard gardens, I bet 40% of the food will be grown in America after 2023. It'll be that traumatic of an event coming up for those few months. Now, here's the secret, though. If you're prepared and you have some stored foods, you can have some seeds, microgreens, you can grow some things in a garden, save that, can things, dry things, dehydrate, whatever. If you're even a smidgen prepared, and you can rock through these, say, 8 months until the next planting season, you'll be just fine. We all will. But it's that point of September onward until the next planting season that you need to get ready for. And this podcast has been brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet. If you support this kind of content, please visit My Patriot Supply and TrueLeafMarket.com. I appreciate you spending your time with us, and I'll see you next interview.